Hey there, welcome back to another week of Leading from the Middle, where I am so excited because I've decided this year to connect with 23 different leaders to learn a little bit more about what they believe companies can do to transform their middle managers into their most valuable asset. Let me introduce myself first, I guess. I'm Helen Young-McLaughlin, and this week I'm super excited to introduce you to Kris Liebau. She is an engineer turned leadership coach. And Kris, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, delighted to be here.
So, Kris, if you could share with our listeners a little bit about the work that you've done and that you currently do that kind of ties into what we're talking about today, that would be great.
Yeah, well, you really summed it up with the engineering to leadership coach part of it. So that's my background, which is a little bit unique for a coach. And so 20 years in industry and quality and regulatory and root cause, corrective action, and working on the processes, the products, the procedures. What I saw was that in focusing on all of these external things, we're not focusing on the internal mental processes, and that's the tough part. In engineering, a lot of super smart people, very technically capable. That's not the difficult part. It's communicating effectively, navigating uncertainty, right? Working with others, and the delegate, especially as you move into management. And I'm not an individual contributor, but I love the nitty-gritty of that stuff. What does that transition look like? So I found that even with my love for spreadsheets and flowcharts, I'm actually more interested and passionate about helping leaders in those roles help make that transition and work on those internal mental processes.
So needed, absolutely needed. And I don't want to just say, engineers out there, listen up, because the things that you just mentioned really apply to so many of us. And I think that the engineers that I've worked with and actually currently work with, they would laugh a little bit because the first things that I'm thinking of one client in particular who is phenomenal. And he might have thought, okay, is this the soft stuff we're going to be talking about?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, actually, it's the hard stuff we're going to be talking about.
Sure.
So kudos to what you do and the people that you are serving and supporting. And I'm going to dive in a little bit. Well, I'm going to dive right into the question that I've been asking everybody,
Okay.
which is, Kris, from your perspective, what is one thing? It's hard to pare it down, but what is one thing that companies need to pay closer attention to when it comes to developing their managers?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. And I think one of the big things that gets overlooked is, what does that transition from individual contributor, where I'm responsible for my things, what does that shift look like into managing a team? And not just in title, right? A lot of times people are sitting at the same desk, or maybe they're still at home in their pajamas, whatever it is. And we just think, oh, like, I've got this new responsibility, this new role. What's the intentionality behind that in setting up skills, again, with like the delegation and the planning and the mindset of letting go sometimes of that thing that we were really, really good at, and how to, right? And I think that that's what it is there's attachment because we've done these things and we found satisfaction in them and we were rewarded for doing them well. And now sometimes we're being asked to let go of that. And sometimes it's a bit of a safety blanket in that space. It's like, well, what if I'm not known for that?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to be known for now? Or what's that new thing? And so there's a bit of a, kind of like emotional and motivational side of stuff where people need to make that transition internally. And the other part about that too is sometimes that feedback loop of doing the thing, like it gets completed or there's closure or you get that feedback in that leadership role, that cycle can take longer or it's not as definitive. And so when we're looking, right, for the, whatever the check in the box to say that something is done, it feels different.
So I mean, all parts of me are like, oh yes, let's dive into this a little bit more. Because if I'm taking you back to your engineer roots, that, analysis part, and we open up the discussion to really focus in on the transition from individual contributor to manager in 3 steps, what might that look like? And it doesn't have to be perfect. Let it be imperfect.
Okay, on the spot. I'm an engineer. I like to sit down with my stuff and draw this all out.
Mm-hmm. I know, right? Well, that's really, actually, that's really, that's kind of standing out to me, because if companies actually sat down and leaders sat down and said, hey, let's draw this out, wouldn't that be amazing? We have people that we're putting into management roles. What does that look like for our culture, for our company? In 3 steps, could we do something that, and that's just to kind of get a snapshot. What would it look like? How do we want them to shift from this point over to here? So tell me more about what you would put in there.
Well, one of the things that I like about this simply is the intentionality of it. So a lot of times, right, it's like here's, I've gotten promotions that have literally been like on a sticky note that's like, here's your new title and here's your salary. And
you were managing people.
Right. And then, yes. Right. And then, not get back to work though. Right. There's this thing. It's like, okay, well, what about, what does that transition look like? How do we go about
just figure it out as you go?
So I think
say it tongue in cheek.
Yeah, there's this part. I think there's a part about like a certain formality part of it, and like the celebrating of successes and that type of stuff, even an announcement. I think that's really important to share with other people. This person is taking on this new role. This person or this group is going to be handling this. Simply making a declaration with some of those things that we're thinking through of what that transition plan looks like, to notify people that things are changing. Right. Because there's a lot of inefficiency that happens when, people are like, oh, I didn't get the memo. Well, it's because there wasn't even a memo.
We just keep moving on at the speed that we were moving on before. And what if, because I'm all about the power of the pause, what if companies could pause, come up, like you said, I'm an engineer, I like to draw it out and kind of think about it intentionally. And you just said a couple of things that stood out to me. They're almost step 1 and step 2, but I don't want to speak for you. I'm just saying this is what I see is communication. How do we want to communicate this? And setting expectations. So what does this now mean for other groups and for the individual? It seems too simple to be true, right?
Well, again, there's because this sounds so natural, we're like, oh yeah, we give it a thought, though the question is have we actually taken action on it?
Right.
So I think, there's that aspect of it. So the other part too is, so depending on, so sometimes, right, like there's it depends on what you're transitioning from. If there's a new group or a new task force and there's this new thing and new people are coming into it, right, there's like, everybody's like, well, we've got to figure this out because it's all new. However, when you're doing like this person moved up, so this other person is moving up and there's an existing structure,
Yeah.
right? Part of that is just because you know, step into somebody else's shoes doesn't mean you have to do it that way.
Mhm.
And so there's a part of, you know, like we're trying to fill somebody's shoes, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to fill their shoes. We're a different person, right? And there's things that we liked about it and there's things that we didn't. And
Mhm.
so taking a step back and saying, what worked? You know, what do I want to be different, right? Informing the team that says, hey, you know, like let's, you know, I'm gonna make some changes, or depending on your leadership style. So really thinking and taking some intention to that, that just because you step into an existing role doesn't mean that you have to figure out how to fill, you know, the voids that
Absolutely.
you need to make that your own.
Yes. Getting curious, and this is for the managers. You know, it's funny because a number of the people that I have been honored to connect with on this project of mine have said there's a responsibility to the manager themselves as well as the company, right? The company can set the stage, the company has an obligation to support that manager in transitioning from individual contributor to manager. And then there's also the responsibility of the manager, the person that's going into that role. And what I heard you say is get curious, figure out what that identity is going to look like for that, you know, person, and start asking, you know, jotting down some questions like, how do I want this? How do I want to show up in this role? What's changing for me? And I think the more that we can, insert the pause to get curious, to, you know, kind of craft out the plan, then it allows us, you know, the opportunity to not just keep going business as usual, but to be really intentional, like you said, and thoughtful. And that to me builds trust, it builds better communication, it builds alignment. And I'll be honest, because I've been doing this work for quite a while in the corporate sector and on my own, it's not always thoughtful and intentional,
Mhm.
which ends up, for companies, it ends up costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars in turnover costs versus taking the time, thinking it through, and investing in those, you know, emerging and current managers, which allows them to retain their top talent.
And, you know, I don't remember, somewhere I heard that like, you know, like priority only used to be singular, that there was never a plural of that. I don't know the background on that, but that's one of the challenges in doing this. It's like, oh, you have these people and you have this. And so we have to be intentional and sometimes make really difficult choices about, right, that thing that we're going after. And we do have to set things down, and right. And it's different. Like I said, especially that individual, I'm like really good at this thing, I do this thing. That may not be the important thing anymore.
Yep.
Right. For
And
you
that isn't always talked about, I think, in the workplace or in one-on-one conversations with their managers, to be able to say, you know, let's talk about how you are shifting. What are you having a hard time letting go? I agree with you completely on that.
And with that though, it's, you know, right, there's different levels. If you're going individual contributor to somebody who's supervising people now, right, the person that you're reporting to, they may not have, it's probably likely
Right.
that they don't have that skill set
Yes.
to help support that. And that,
Yes.
right, that's the challenge is it's like, hey, I have this thing, you know, they may not have the capacity, the skill, whatever that is, in order to be able to support that. And, you know, when you step into this new role, it's like, oh, there's going to be discomfort. Like I'm learning new things, like things are going to be uncomfortable. And that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right. It means that you're growing. And so part of that is making friends with some of this new territory, new feelings that are coming up, and to make sure that you continue to move forward rather than become paralyzed.
Totally agree. Love that you said that. And so as we kind of pull this all together, this goes by so quick.
It does.
I need a part 2 with you. So as we pull this all together, if you were going to bottom line the number one thing that you would like companies to pay closer attention to when it comes to developing their managers, what are you saying?
It's navigating that uncertainty of, that, like I said, there's that uncomfortable feeling. We feel like we're doing it wrong. There can be a lot of judgment, within that comes about that. And it's managing that to help those people grow or be comfortable or do those things differently, rather than saying, shutting down, this is too stressful, I don't have the resources type of a thing. Having that resource internally or externally to be able to foster and provide support for that change is really essential. Again, you talked about the turnover costs and all that comes in with it.
It all does. So listen up. I love what Kris is saying here today. I think you're spot on for companies to really lean into, start drafting a plan first. Like, don't just allow your people to transition without some sort of a plan. And to be honest, it doesn't take probably as long as they think it might. So come up with a plan, understand that people, need that support going from one set of skills to the other. It's not the same from individual contributor to manager. And so allowing and supporting the new managers to create their identity and what does it exactly mean to be in this role, set those expectations and start communicating clearly from the top. It's just the start. And I think if some people started there, they're going to do really well moving forward. Kris, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, learn a little bit about you, and I believe I did not mention this, but you were voted one of the top coaches in the Detroit area recently, weren't you?
Yes, I was. Top 15 coaches in 2023.
Great. That's awesome. Congratulations. So if people want to reach you, where do they go? How do they connect with you?
Yeah, well, my company's name is Action and Ease Coaching, so people can always visit actionandeasecoaching.com.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn, so they can come find me, Kris, Kris, Liebau, Liebeau.
And thank you so much, Kris, not only for being here, but I am doing a give back as part of this project. So after my final interview, I will be donating $2,023 to a local group called Hospice of the Chesapeake. And I appreciate you being a part of that. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in to another interview of Leading from the Middle. I'm really looking forward to hearing some feedback from you. I want to connect with you. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn at Helen Young-McLaughlin. Just hit that hyphen in between Young and McLaughlin, or you can go to my website at helenyoungcoaching.com. Thanks again and have a great day.